Hearts and minds out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode. Today, we have some new people on our platform to talk with us. We have Gayatri and Emmanuel. Hi, guys, and welcome to this talk today. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Yeah, and Emmanuel has left immediately. He'll be joining soon, I guess. No worries. So I'll just brief you upon it. You can just do all those organic talks out here. Language is not a barrier. Like if you want to suddenly switch to another language for better conveying of anything, you can just suddenly switch and you just need to text me later what's the meaning of that, whichever language you use. And so yeah, um, today I am thought our talk can have the topic called as independence. Since now today as we record, it's August 14th and just a day away from Indian independence. And since we are all Indians, it's a good topic to talk about. And yeah, independence will be talked about in two levels, like the national independence that we Indians have and a personal independence that we personally need. So on both these perspectives, we will be talking about, and I hope Emmanuel will not have any much nest issues and he'll be able to join soon. And so, yeah, so it was on 1947 that India got independence. Yeah, Emmanuel has joined. Emmanuel.
Yeah, yeah, I'm there. You
Yeah,
kicked me
so
out by
I
mistake.
was just telling her like this podcast has no language barrier. Suddenly, if you want to switch to any language, you can do that for to convey your message better, and you can just tell me the meaning later. So I'll put it as subtitles when we upload the whole thing. And so yeah, we are talking about independence on personal and national level. So as we know, like India got the independence in 1947. Ever since then, it's been something like how many years do you think? It's 74 years now, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
Sanif.
approximately.
74 years is a long time. So what do you think? Like well, 74 years ago, one country gets independence. What do is India up to the mark? Like in 74 years, is this all that a country can achieve? What do you think about it? Yeah, either of you can go
I
first.
don't, fine, I'll go. I don't think India has actually yet achieved independence. They just changed ownership. They went from British politicians to Indian politicians, control the country. They take all the money. They do what they want with the country. Nobody gives a damn. But we can just call it independence because you're governed by Indian people. That's all. I
What
don't
do you
think
say,
India has
Gayatri?
achieved anything in terms of the human resources we have, we rival like countries like China. We have achieved what quarter of their success in all areas, especially stuff like sports. We saw one guy get a gold medal in sports, and he was applauded as a national hero. But then nobody actually looks at the backstory on how we reached that place. Like he's the only one who actually dared to push through the boundaries and try to pursue at school. All the other kids who tried, their parents just sent them to some coaching centers. Like you're stuck with this life now, stay there. Enjoy coaching, get JE, study engineering or doctors, whatever.
Isn't
That's
that
what
what you're
happens in
also
India. It's
doing,
not.
Emmanuel? Isn't that what you're also
Yes,
doing?
exactly,
Studying engineering?
exactly. I wanted to study literature. I wanted to study literature.
See the irony. See, that's
Okay,
the
I have like
Emmanuel.
a different turn on this. Okay,
Okay,
when
sure.
India first gained its independence, see, India being India, so diverse, and like every state has its own language, its own culture. Heck, they even have their own climate. Like climate in India is like very extreme, not like as if you have the desert area like Rajasthan, and then you have the Himalayas, and then you have the coastal areas. Like even the climate is different, yeah. So
Actually,
for like a country which is so apart and so different and so diverse, they still manage to like work as a single unit. That is something
yeah,
I don't
survived
think.
together for 74 years.
Yes, I mean, to be so different and still be in the same place with a proper functioning government body. I don't think if it was another person, I mean, another country or like another leader, I don't think it would have been possible. Like, India long back was a country with moral and values, and they actually had patriotism within people, you know. I think that is kind of lost right now. Like, throughout the years, uh, like that unity, I feel like it's kind of falling apart. Like
So
74
that,
years, like you said, it's a very long time, and
yeah,
I don't
74.
feel like it's as strong as it was before.
But yeah, your outlook, that positive outlook is something new to me, and yeah, that's an appreciation for surviving together. Even in this diversity, the unity is very much appreciated. That for 74 years, it's not a short time. So, what do you think? Like kicking out the English people was actually a good decision or not? Because you know, there are disadvantages and there are also advantages. It's not like India has got a lot of better with this, but like things would have been different. What do you support or do you go against it? Do you go against it like that?
Okay, like here, what I would like to say is that when British, see the word um, colonization is like so different. Like when if you want to take over a territory, it's like you go there, you conquer it, right? And then you just rule over the entire area as if it's your own. But what British did here was colonization, and that is like a very personally for me, it's a very weird concept. It's like you travel to a place and then you make everyone in that place learn about your culture, and you just basically want to turn them into you. That is what colonization is. So, but that concept, what British tried to imply in India, was very wrong, because I think what they didn't realize is that India is like I said, it's different in different parts of the country. So, I think one reason they miserably failed was because of such kind of leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and people like that. And a second reason is that there were certain advantages for them coming. So, for example, the railways. I don't think those would have happened if the British weren't there. And the need to be independent and to work as a single unit came because they were invaded. I don't think India would be independent if they weren't invaded. So I think that's a plus point. There are
Yeah,
negative points
also like
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
things like
I mean, like we follow
railway,
the British curriculum, like currently in CBSE we do follow a bit of British curriculum in it. Like the English we learn is British.
and of course
So
we even our
yeah,
driver
they've
side
left
is
their
also.
mark. They've definitely left their mark, and we've basically lost Sanskrit from almost all schools in India. Like it's so rare to find Sanskrit in schools in India, and
Yeah, I
I
see that
think
on.
yeah, government is trying to bring back like a lot of traditional Indian languages into our culture and everything, but it's kind of hard. In the 21st century, it's getting hard.
What do you think, Emmanuel? Should actually, should them be kicked out?
You're going to you'll be editing this, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, then I would like to say the British allowed Indians to pull their head out of their own ass. Okay, we were fighting over territories and so stuck up in our own world for so long. Like you had like 1 square kilometer, and that was a new country in India. Every 2 days we would have a new country. Okay, so the British came, and then we finally realized that we need to stop fighting between ourselves, and we need to kick these people out because they are trying to mess up with our traditions. Also, another thing is that like colonization. Okay, what's it? Yeah, Gayatri told about colonization without going into any religious battles. But isn't that basically what religion is also? Like this, I don't know. We have some myth about this Christian saint coming to Kerala and then him introducing Christianity in Kerala. So basically, he's converting them to his religion, and that religion follows a certain culture and a certain method of life. So you're basically converting them into, I don't know, to a Christian means like it's similar to colonization, right? And in that aspect, the British failed, but also they succeeded because we have like I don't know, thrice quadruple the number of Christians since the British era because the Christian community is still around all over India. But then the British also didn't actually think that we were actually intelligent enough to come together and properly kick them out of the land. They still thought of us as tribals, aboriginals from USA or something. They thought it would be as easy as going there and kicking out the tribals, okay, and we'll take over the land. It's fine. But that didn't happen here, sadly. I do think that the British influence was very good for India because we finally actually learned to think like a country. Also, the English language, we would have never been introduced to it. And imagine if we were like, I don't know, some underdeveloped country still that does not know about the importance of English. Only because the British came to India, I think that we learned that the English language is going to be very commonly used and we have to start training our kids. We lost a lot of other languages, but at least we gained English. That's all we can say.
Yeah, we
That's
have
what I think on the topic.
definitely fallen in love with English. We can't think a life without
Yeah, we
English
fell
right
in
now.
love with the language. Yeah,
Okay, like can I
we did.
add like an opinion here?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with the K-pop culture, the Korean wave.
Okay, yeah, I know.
Yeah, so you will pretty much know, right? Like all the K-dramas and all the boy groups and the idols and everything. It's a huge thing right now. It's trending apparently.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the thing I used to be a fan, not so much now, but I still do watch up on their shows a bit. The thing is that if you notice, the pattern of culture in South Korea is that they use Korean for everything, like everything. They like you go onto the streets, unless it's Seoul City, you don't have a translation of English anywhere else in Korea, unless you are in a main city in Korea. You don't have like an English translation, or unless you're in a tourist hotspot, you won't have an English translation for anything in that country. They are so into their own language and culture. Like it's not like they don't disregard English completely. No, every school in Korea they teach English. It's a must. Okay, but the fact is that their songs and their writings and the entire country itself is so in, they're comfortable with their language. Like no matter how much tourist attraction they're having in a certain spot, they're not still letting go of it completely. I feel like, okay, in Malayalam also there are certain words, right? Like trains and T1Ds and everything. Now when you look at the newspaper from back then and when you look at the newspapers now, the word in Malayalam is written as train itself. That T1D, that word, you're losing it. I feel like at certain times we're
That's
just
right.
letting go of what we already had. Like we're not being able to sustain it. So when I see countries like uh, this South Korea and everything, and they're so into their own language, they're so fit and they're so comfortable with it that like learning English is good, because if you want to like adapt to an international environment, you need like a common medium of communication that is necessary. But then to let go of your own language for something like that, I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah, what that is stated is something worth of the point, because as she said, in South Korea they actually hold on to their language even though English is actually out there. They just don't let English take over what they have. That's something appreciable, because the same point was raised by Mr. Kamal Hassan some time ago when he actually criticized the writings that were coming out in his own native language called Tamil, where he said like people from 100 years ago were writing pure Tamil, and now there's a there's only 10% Tamil in the so-called Tamil writing, he says. So that's something like that is something that we should consider changing. Actually, it's always, changes are always welcome at any point of time. Like even now we can change that, that existence of curbing our an international language more than we actually don't encourage our language as much as we encourage English. And so that's something that we can learn from Korea, and
Yes.
that's appreciable, of course. So the next thing is like in the future years, like right, like how India is going out right there now, how situations are going out, how the administrations are working, the major political parties that are already in power, like that are expected to rise in power. Like for example, nowadays you can see like companies forming their own parties. Like one example from Kerala is like the recently disseminated the 2020 party, which was formed by Kitex. So like that, companies are coming out with their own parties, with their own candidates. They are, as you have seen from the reports, when they ruled over a panchayat, they have left over some money, which is something very new in the system of India. So, in the context of all this, where do you see India will be heading in the next coming years?
I don't think anything is going to change that much. I mean, small parties like the 2020 are going to keep popping up. They're going to do good things. They're going to do good things for small areas, maybe a village, maybe a full city, maybe even a full state like Arvind Kejriwal. They're really educated guy who actually wants to service people. But then in the grand scheme of things, I don't think the bigger parties, the ones who actually have the power, I don't know, maybe underhanded methods, or because I don't know, their loyalty from people who blindly believe in the party, they're not going to let the other smaller parties come into that much power. And people like Arvind Kejriwal itself, he's an enigma in the political world right now in India, because I don't think I've ever seen anybody from like such a good education, such a young age, and also without no external support from the major parties, the Communist, Congress, and the BJP, come into such a powerful position and actually keep his promises. I've seen people come into some positions by luck and all, who are educated and who are young, blah blah blah, independent, but they don't keep their promises. Once they come into power, they just lose all sense and they're like, ah, fine, now we have power, I'll just make money. That's normal political thinking. But then there are a few people like this who will come into power. Occasionally, some states will grow up for some time, and then the other bigger parties will come back in again. They'll rule the state again. This will keep going like a cycle, I think. I'm not sure about it. It could change at any time. The Indian people could actually get a rude awakening to the political system and decide they want to overhaul the whole system. But that's unlikely. That's my view on the topic.
What do you say, Gayatri?
Actually, there's a point in what he said. Like, I think when we elect our leaders, I really feel like there should be a minimum educational qualification to the leader you're selecting, because uh, I know, like, once you have a prime minister or once you have like a state representative, you'll definitely have IAS officers with them, and these IAS officers are highly educated. They are really educated people, and they write your speeches for you. They give you choices to make decisions from. But in the end of the day, you're the one who makes the choice. So the person itself should be educated, and they should have a certain minimum educational qualification. And I feel like that is something India should implement when they give when they give when the candidates are like supposed to apply, they should have a minimum educational qualification. And the thing is, like, don't ask me how Trump became the president, because apparently in the US they do actually have a minimum educational qualification if you want to become a president. And there are like a lot of things that you should be in the law sector for a certain time, you should do certain voluntary work, and there are lots of criteria if you want to become a president in America. Like, you need the experience there to be in such a post. As that's one of the reasons why I really don't understand how Trump became president. But then I feel like India as a country, and it's good, somebody who cares for the country, regardless of his or her educational background, race, or caste, can become a ruler in India. That is kind of good. It is liberating. But in the 21st century, the need of education is pretty high, and the power to make important choices is also pretty high. So you need people up to the mark and up to the standard to make such kind of decisions. So I feel like that is something India should change, and it's high time they changed it.
So, what do you say about this? There's this quote called "We kicked out educated Englishmen and bought an illiterate Indian man." What are comments on that? You can give your separate comments on that. It's just a quote that I read randomly.
See, illiterate men in the sense, these men, see, back in long back when India gained its independence, India was like on some kind of huge economic crisis. The entire country was poor. and the health sector was weak, education system was weak, there wasn't enough food for everyone. It was just in such a bad state, but then we pulled through that because the common men know what the difficulties of common men are. So the thing is that if they can't, like, I don't think a person with a higher authority or like a higher living standard can actually recognize what the problem of common men is. But that's not the state which India is in currently. In right now in India, I feel like a 90%, at least a minimum of 70% of like the population is educated well enough and well to do. But the thing is, like, at least in South India, that's where I'm from, we value education really, like, to a, like a different level. We do variations apparently, so we do value education to a certain level. And in the 21st century, it is very necessary, like, to have someone educated. So what I'm trying to say is that back in those times, this quote was kind of valid because only the common men knew what their struggles were. From someone from a very a higher class or a middle class who wouldn't understand what it's like to be a common man in India during that time. So only they could understand their struggles. So to bring in such kind of people to represent as a part of a decision-making body is a good choice. And I think it still is a good choice to bring in such kind of people. But I
But
feel
as
like
you
the
said,
final
education
decision
is still
maker,
important, right?
yes, because right now, like, you know where the world is heading to. Like, everybody knows everything about everybody, and information is just there out there. And so you need someone who's like willing to grasp everything and then process it and then make a valuable and valid decision. So you need to be educated enough for that.
What do you say, Emmanuel?
For one thing, she actually took most of my words out of my mouth. Second thing is in that code, it absolutely makes no sense in a way. If you're talking about the beginning of a country, because you can't call those people who were in power at those time illiterate. We call the British men literate because they could talk and read and write in their language. And our people, our leaders at that time, they could also write and read in their own language. So that technically makes them literate. And yeah, like she said, at that time, they were the perfect candidates because we were just as a beginning of a country. It's basically like when you start from a farm and then you develop into a big company. When you're starting a farm, you just need to know the basics on how to take care of plants, sow the seed, all that stuff. And the founding government actually did a pretty good job. They propelled all of us to start learning, and they showed us the importance of education and all that. But nowadays, everybody is educated. Like especially in the South, like she said, South Indians, for them, education is life. Their sole dream from the moment their child is born is to turn them into some kind of NEET toppers or IIT toppers. For most of them, it's a generic dream in all over South India. And if you are going to put somebody there, I'm taking for example the Education Minister of Kerala. Please put somebody with. You need somebody with at least a bit of common sense and also a bit of education to know actually what you're talking about. He is the education minister for God's sake, and he has like I don't know, like 25% idea of what the students are actually going through. He feels like there is no need for an exam, just goes to the Senate and is like, no more exam. He'll even fight it out there on the field. He'll fight it out like a normal, I don't know, caveman or something. But we need somebody who actually understands what students are going through. When they say online education, for most of the people from his generation, our current education minister, they're like, online education is so easy. Nobody gives a damn. You come into class if you want, get out of class if you want. You can copy in all the exams. But nobody understands the strain of what the student is going through. But if you do want somebody to understand that situation, you need somebody around, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30, 35 years old who actually understand working online, using the mobile a lot, what type of strain it puts on your body. So right now, even if the person was illiterate, I wouldn't mind. Like if he can't, I don't know, talk and read in English, I wouldn't mind. But he should be able to at least, empathize with all the people, be able to understand the situation of what's going on around the people in the place he's governing. I don't want him to sit on a high seat, look down upon everybody, and he's like, okay, that guy is not suffering that much. It's fine. I leave him be. Okay, if I support that guy, I'm going to get I don't know, more support for the next election, so I'll just go ahead and support that guy. Two kids died yesterday on a bike crash, Kerala. There's a guy and a girl traveling. They got hit by a car. It was clearly the car's fault. The guy was under, I think, some influence or something. Okay, but the fact is that the first 100 to 200 comments were that's a guy and a girl riding together on a bike. Okay, they hit a car. Okay, they must
Yeah,
have been college
I
students who
understand
ran off
what
from
the
their home.
mentality of society was at.
Yeah, we don't want people with that type of a mental attitude to come into positions of power. Be it the media which shows the people or the government. It's all bullshit in my opinion. In that case, we need somebody who's actually open-minded and can understand the older generation and the younger generation alike. Hence why I think middle-aged people would be the best to run the country and all. Yeah, see, I read a sentence yesterday. It was like all over the world, 70s, maybe 60 to 80-year-old people, we sideline them telling that they have no mental capacity to do any work. Yet, almost all the world's nations are exclusively governed by these people. How does that make sense? That is the situation in
This world
India
is
right
so
now.
controversial in
All
itself.
it is controversial. It's a paradox basically. You tell your grandmother and grandfather you can't take the bike out and go somewhere. You can't go to a movie alone. You're old. But then the very next day, you guys go ahead and vote for the next prime minister who's 75 or 80 who can barely walk. That's a controversial thing. So yeah, I'm not going into much controversy. I don't want to get kicked out by the Indian
Yeah, you
government
don't want to be kicked
since I'm
out.
studying in India.
All right, all right. So before we, I know we have to also talk about the personal independence. So I would like to take each of your definitions on how you define independence on a personal basis. What is personal independence for you? What do you expect out of it? What you don't want to? What things do you don't you don't want to interrupt? What things actually break your independence as a person, as an unique person. What breaks your independence? You just tell me about your stand on that. Yeah, Gayatri can start.
Okay, so personal independence. Mm. So for me, currently what personal independence means is that, okay, I don't have a driver's license. My parents don't trust me enough with a car. And I definitely don't have any sort of vehicle that I can ride on my own. I don't have a bicycle either. So yeah, so for me, personal independence is limited. Like I have the right to like choose what I wear when I go outside. I do my own laundry. I clean my own room. I get to decide the way my books are. Like so small things. I have control over very little things in my life. Being an NRI abroad here, like the last time I even got into a taxi was 4 years ago when my dad's car broke down. Okay. Legit, I swear to God, I have never rode in a taxi after that. Like that's it. I just rode in a taxi 2 times in my entire life. And like everywhere I want to go, either dad or mom, they takes the car and they leave me to the place. Even to reach a certain destination, I need their help. So my independence currently is quite low, if you ask me. And like I think the
Where do you
main
want to
reason
get it
because
to?
of
Like, where do you want to head
oh,
it
I
to?
do want to take it to amazing heights. Like I want to be financially independent. That's my first goal. But I feel like if you're financially independent, a lot of things just happen automatically. And I feel like independence is something also where schools can play a role in because see, I don't know why that our school doesn't teach us about tax management. Like why don't high schoolers get taught about tax management? Like here you don't realize a single thing. But when you go to India, when you start living on your own, you like really like it'll really hit you, like that you do not know how to manage your taxes. And I feel like that is something a high school student should be like informed about. And yeah, there are like small things that you can start doing by yourself. But currently, dude, my independence is like very low. It's like rock bottom. And I feel like, maybe if I reach college and I'm gonna start living by my own in a hostel, so at least like uh, I can do like the bare minimum of my life independently. But for me, independence is something basically to work and like function as a single person for at least like a month. I don't want my parents' help, at least that much. So yeah, I don't want to like lean on anyone. I feel that's when my independence just break up. And lots of Gen Z apparently think that they confuse between being alone, lonely, and independent. That's like a whole different sector. So I think that is something which the current generation confuses upon. Is being alone independent? If you ask me, that is a very, I don't know, it's mixed reactions to that question. But for me, currently being independent is trying to like go from one place to another without my parents.
But Emmanuel, you can relate to it more better because you have gone from being in here as an
Yeah.
NRI to Rajagiri boarding with me, and then you're now in an studying engineering. So your independence levels have increased over time. How do you can just
It has grown
evaluate
much.
that?
Yeah, see, the first thing I'll say is independence to me is a myth. There is no such thing as actual independence. Even from anything that you do, even though you think you're doing it on your own, for example, like, I don't know, cooking your own food, you still cook the food that you were taught at a young age. Basically, that is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about cooking food. That you got imparted it from your parents. So it's like, I don't know, it's what they programmed you to cook first. So you're still cooking that again. You wake up in the morning and you're living alone and you're thinking about having breakfast. The first thing you would remember is, okay, mom taught me how to make chai and bread and omelette. I'll make that. That's easy. So we are doing it on our own, but we have been mentally programmed by our parents from a young age. This is easiest to do. This is for breakfast. You can have this for breakfast. If you are having dinner, you won't think first thing, oh, I'll make some bread and eggs. You won't because your parents never thought you it's for dinner. They even assigned specific time for the food. But as an NRA who was stuck in Dubai till 10th, and then I came to Rajagiri, I would say my independence level went from -100 to like 10,000 for me. Everybody says you're going away from your house, you're going to be stuck in a boarding under a like a manager or managerial, like somebody with a managerial role is going to have total control over your life. Those 2 years in the hostel was the most free I actually felt from when I came from Dubai. In India, the mindset has already actually started changing, especially in Kerala and all. The kids are given a lot more freedom. Most of the kids my age already have their licenses. They have cars. Even I have a license, and I don't even know how to drive for. When I have a license, everybody's got a license. They have cars. They're free to. Most of them are free to come and go as they wish. They go out with their friends daily. To go out with your friends daily is a foreign concept in Dubai, especially alone. You want to even go to the next area supermarket to buy something for yourself. You call your mom or your dad. They take you by a car and then they'll hover around you
Exactly.
to watch whatever you're buying. They'll be looking over you. Okay, what are you buying? What are you're buying that book? That book has this picture. That's dirty. You can't buy it. It might not even be related to anything. Your mother might be reading Manida that is more, I don't know, like semi-nude pics than the whatever book you're going to buy. But that doesn't matter. The parents in Dubai, especially South Indian parents who came at that time 20, 30 years ago from Kerala or Tamil Nadu or South India to Dubai, this two feet, you have to hover around them so that you can see whatever they are doing. I have never gotten in a taxi in Dubai ever. Not even when my dad's car got broke. My dad just called another guy and got another loan car for the time. He's like, no, we don't go in taxi. Taxi is not safe. But you come here to Kerala, I experienced the joy of riding in a bus. I never thought I would say I would prefer uh, going in a bus, in a KSRTC, in a rickety or KSRTC bus, to going through smooth
It's an
roads.
adventure.
I
It's
don't
an
know, in a Lexus.
adventure.
I love the
Yeah,
KSRTC bus and I love auto rickshaws. Like, I love them.
Yeah, go.
exactly. You
You learn
actually
that.
feel more connected to that. You feel way more connected to buses than you feel to the luxury cars that you had in Dubai. But once in a while, you will feel, oh, why are all the cars here so bad? I wish I had that good car from Dubai. But once you actually sit in a bus alone, you're sitting in the window seat and you're listening to music, whichever music you want, by yourself, going to a destination by your own, you actually feel free for the first time in your life. You're like, okay, did my voice go? Hello?
Guys, we'll join back after a short break. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Welcome back, guys, and we'll just wind up this soon with a few more questions. Like, well, as we're talking about personal independence, like there's a lot of people out there who, their personal independence is being interrupted while they move on to different stages of life. Like when you work in a place, when you work under a boss, your independence is limited out there to an extent. Like you can't make decisions, you can't give commitment like that. Sometimes your boss comes in between. Like at one point of time, it's your parents who limit your independence, but then it's your boss, then it becomes your life partner, then slowly, if you have children, your children limits it, then like that there's a lot of people who will limit your freedom, your independence. Like they'll make you to depend on people. You can't always be independent. So what do you how do you look at that? Like what do you think, if, is it right to do like that, or like how can we separate from all such stuff? Like even all these circumstances, can we actually emerge out independent even while there will be situations while that forces to be dependent on people? Like what do you say about it?
You're supposed to speak.
Me?
Yeah, go
Anyone
ahead.
can start. Anyone can start.
Okay, Emmanuel can start.
Okay, so like I said last question, independence, like true independence is a myth. We are all like just like animals, man. We are basically around animals, and animals have to depend on each other survival. So we can't say that I'm completely independent and I can do whatever I want. That is an impossibility. Even if you are like a billionaire's son, you're still bound by the rules of your father. If your father passes away and all the money is inherited to you, you're still bound by the rules of the bank that gives you the money, that stores your money. You're bound by the rules of the stock market. If your company crashes and you lose all your money, you lose your current way of life. So true independence is not something that you can properly achieve. I mean, the realistic goal would be to be content with the amount of independence that you are actually able to get. You can push for maximum independence, but you have to learn to concede and give away control at sometimes. And that's what I think on the topic.
Okay, what I think is that like, okay, being independent is like you as a person, as a single unit, being able to meet all your needs by yourself. So in the sense like your basic need to like have a shelter, to have food, to like function as a living being of a society on your own, now that is independent. So if you don't need like anybody's help, yes, going to a job and your workplace environment, that can be influenced by a lot of external factors. You are not like fully independent there, like you don't have lots of choices to choose from there. But then you as like a person individually, I think, yeah, the bare minimum of independence you can get is to not lean on anyone. So and then I feel like nowadays, when people say being independent, they also like take it as a meaning, or like, what can I say, like not to be vulnerable. I mean, I don't think that's the thing, because being emotionally independent and being physically independent are like two different things. Meeting your day-to-day needs, like bringing food to the table or having a roof to like sleep under, now that is like physical independence, that's there. But then emotional independence is also, I think, a huge factor. Like in the 21st century, it's a huge factor, like mental health going around like everywhere these days. So, and plus, we're stuck at homes all day. So, our emotional health practically is degrading to like a whole new level now. So, people confuse that what if you become vulnerable emotionally, you some people consider it as a weakness, that no, that you're not independent enough. I don't think that's healthy. Being like to have like an emotional independence, that is okay to some level, but I feel like you can still be like vulnerable and you can still be powerful. Like you can have a gentle heart and still you can stand to your point, you don't necessarily have to go or march on everything. And still, what I'm trying to say is that you can be calm and you still can be fierce. And the best people, they have both these qualities in them. So I feel like there are like situations in life where you can choose to be independent and not be independent. So at like certain scenarios and situations, it's best to lean on people. Okay, like in certain situations, it's good if you lean on people. It's healthy if you lean on people. But like for a lot of other situations, it's best to stay on your own, like to show that you're independent. So what I'm trying to say is like you should pick your own wars. Like you should know when to stand alone and when to lean on. So I think that is like where your presence of mind comes in. Yeah, this is my opinion.
So yeah, that's a wonderful statement from both of you, and I like how you take like how you take your stance with mutual points and with your own separate points. I like how your stance differ and how they actually make a point without being senseless, or there's no actually foolishness or anything in your points. So you can actually see a clear stand in both of your points. So that is something I really appreciate. Keep it up. And yeah, thank you for joining this recording session today, and thank you for joining us on Hearts and Minds Out. So this is just a new podcast show, and I'm just trying to, get it to wherever it's possible. As of now, it will be just on YouTube, and if it becomes a success, we'll someday get on Spotify, dude. Okay.
Yes, sure,
So
definitely.
yeah,
Thank you for having us.
yeah. Thank you.
I'm happy to actually talk to somebody after a long time without being ridiculed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is some
I hate of it.
brainstorming going on.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for listening to us. All of you who are listening to us, thank you for listening to us. And this is me, Joel.
Me,
And
Manuel, I guess.
yeah,
Me,
and the
Gayatri.
last person. All of
Gayatri.
us signing off. Thank you. Thank you.